Hey everyone, and welcome. We're about to dive into a really fascinating and honestly kind of mind-bending idea from Sun Tzu's Art of War. Think about this. What if you could not just win a conflict, but actually come out of it stronger, way stronger than when you started?
I mean, just think about it for a second. War, at its very core, is all about consumption, right? It just burns through everything: resources, equipment, and of course, people. The longer it goes on, the heavier the losses. So even when you win, you're often left totally depleted, just exhausted. But what if that's not the whole story?
And this is where Sun Tzu just completely flips the script. He looked at this basic problem, this attrition, and he asked a totally different question. Instead of just accepting that war is this giant drain on resources, he came up with a way to actually gain more than you lose, a way to literally turn your enemy's strength into your own.
And look, this wasn't just some vague philosophical concept. Sun Tzu laid out a real practical blueprint for how to do this. He basically argued that, hey, just like you can forage for food in enemy territory, you can also absorb their chariots, their weapons, and, yep, even their soldiers. This is the key right here. Shengdi or Yiqiang. It means to defeat the enemy, and by doing that, increase your own power. So it's not just about winning the battle. It's about strategic absorption. It's about looking at your enemy not as something to just be destroyed, but as a potential source of your own future strength.
So how do you pull this off? Well, Sun Tzu, using chariot warfare as his example, breaks it down into 3 pretty brilliant steps. First, you've got to incentivize your own troops. Give rewards to the soldiers who capture enemy gear. This makes them want to acquire resources, not just blow them up. Second, you convert those resources right away. Slap your flags on those captured chariots, mix them in with your own, and get them back in the fight. And third, and this is the absolute game changer, nurture people. You have to treat captured soldiers well. By showing them kindness, you earn their loyalty, and you turn your former enemies into your new fighters.
Okay, so that all sounds great in theory, right? But did it actually work in the real world? Well, history gives us some incredibly powerful and really contrasting examples. We're going to look at 2 completely different approaches taken by ancient generals, and the wildly different outcomes they got.
So first up, let's look at a total masterclass in this principle from General Zhu Ti. He was up against a really powerful enemy, but instead of just brute force, he used Sun Tzu's wisdom. He treated his prisoners so well that the enemy soldiers and even their civilians were just blown away. And here's where he got really clever. He knew local leaders were in a tough spot, so he actually let them pretend to be loyal to his enemy, while they secretly fed him information. The result? He got this priceless stream of intelligence and massive popular support, basically turning the enemy's own backyard into his biggest advantage.
In this chart just lays it out perfectly, right? The 2 paths. On one side, you've got Zhu Ti. His path of nurturing led to a smart, sustainable victory built on support and intelligence. And on the other side, you have generals like Bai Qi and Sheng Yu. They chose slaughter. They massacred hundreds of thousands of soldiers who had already surrendered, thinking it would crush the enemy's spirit. But it did the exact opposite. All they did was create this deep, burning hatred that fueled desperate resistance and, in the end, helped lead to their own downfall.
And this quote from General Bai Qi, wow, it just says everything. It reveals the entire mindset behind that strategy of just annihilation. It wasn't a choice made from a position of strategic strength. It was a choice born from fear. He was afraid he couldn't control the prisoners, afraid they'd rebel later. He only saw a threat to be eliminated, not a resource to be gained. And that fear completely blinded him to what would happen next.
Okay, so now let's fast forward from the ancient world to the 20th century, because we're going to see how this timeless idea was applied on a massive, almost industrial scale. This is where the concept goes from being one general's smart tactic to a full-blown institutional doctrine. The concept is called Wajie Di Jun, which basically means disintegrating the enemy's forces, and it was one of the 3 core principles of the People's Liberation Army's political work. Now, the key here is that it wasn't about fighting harder, it was about fighting smarter. The entire goal was to make the enemy army fall apart from the inside out by winning over their soldiers and just destroying their will to fight, using policy and good treatment, not just force.
And the results? I mean, they were absolutely staggering. During the Chinese Civil War, over 1.7 million nationalist KMT soldiers were absorbed into the PLA. Now, this wasn't just about replacing your own losses. This was a massive transfer of manpower from one side to the other. So why did it work so well? Well, most of the KMT soldiers were from poor families. After they were captured, they were put through re-education, and they saw the PLA's culture, where officers and soldiers were treated more as equals. For a lot of them, this was a much better deal, and they went from being prisoners to committed fighters almost overnight.
This quote from Mao Zedong just hammers the point home perfectly.
Winning over the enemy's troops wasn't a side project. It was considered an equally important pillar of victory, right up there with winning battles on the field. It was like fighting on a second front, one that wasn't fought with bullets, but with policy, with kindness, and with showing people a better way.
And here is the absolute, undeniable proof of that nurturing principle in action. This wasn't just about absorbing the rank-and-file soldiers. In 1955, when the PLA created its formal ranking system, guess what? Tons of former high-ranking nationalist officers were given senior ranks. We're talking about men like Chen Min-ren and Tao Ziyu becoming full generals in the army they had just been fighting against. That sent an unbelievably powerful message. If you switch sides, it's not the end of your career. It could actually be a whole new beginning.
So what does all this ancient military strategy mean for us today, right now? Well, the power of this idea goes way, way beyond the battlefield. It's a fundamental principle of competition and growth that you can pretty much apply to any part of your life.
When you boil it all down, the core lesson is this. True, long-lasting strength doesn't come from just crushing your competition. It comes from finding clever ways to absorb their strengths, to learn from what they do well, and maybe even to win over their people or their customers. It's all about transforming that competitive energy, that force that was once pointed at you, and turning it into a force that pushes you forward.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. Whether it's in business, in your career, or even in personal rivalries, take a look at your competitors, your adversaries. Instead of just thinking about how to beat them, ask yourself a different question. How can I convert their strength into my own? How can I turn a foe into a friend, and in that process, become so much stronger?